When we think about these little handheld electronic devices right here, we think about all the amazing things they bring us. How they allow us to connect with other people on the other side of the world. How everything's just a click away. How we have information at our fingertips like never before. How they're an amazing tool and they make our lives much easier. How they've given us a tremendous amount of convenience and comfort. But there's something else that these things have done that we've kind of glossed over and that nobody's talking about. And that thing is actually reshaping the way our world operates. It's reshaping everything about our lives, and it's going to determine our future. And it has nothing to do with social media. It has nothing to do with consuming content or the fact that these things connect us with people on the other side of the planet. It has everything to do with how this is changing the way we spend our time, how it's changing the financial aspect of our world in general. And this is very, very important because this literally is the future. This is shaping our future. And what I'm referring to here is how everything in our modern world is moving to a subscription-based and renter society. And I know you've probably heard this before. You've probably heard people talking about the fact that that's kind of the direction we're headed, and you've probably noticed it because most of the stuff that we have today is trending in that direction. But this goes much, much deeper than just the thought that we're having to rent and subscribe to things more than ever before. As a matter of fact, this is going to impact all of us, whether we like it or not, and we're kind of being forced into it. So I don't know about you, but I'm old enough to remember back before we had convenience. I was born in the 80s, and back in those days, we didn't really subscribe to much. We didn't rent much. We didn't have many memberships. It was a much simpler way of life. As a matter of fact, we had a TV. I think whenever I was growing up, it might have actually even been a black and white TV, but I know it was one of those big TVs in like a, I don't know what you would call it. It's like a big wooden box. It's almost like a pedestal or something, but it was this TV pedestal mounted in this big wooden frame. And you had to get up and turn the knobs. There was no remote. And we had this massive antenna mounted outside of our farmhouse. And you had to actually go outside and turn the antenna to tune into certain channels. That is what we had for entertainment. Needless to say, we didn't watch TV that much because it was kind of a hassle. But obviously that's changed because we moved from that to satellite dishes. And I'm also old enough to remember the old satellite dishes, which were about the size of a car. And if you wanted to tune into a different station, the whole satellite dish would actually move and rotate like those big military ones that you see that peer off into space. It was like that. And that cost money. And then, of course, we got into cable, which also costs money. So gradually, when it came to entertainment, we started moving slowly away from the stuff that was free. And granted, the stuff that was free wasn't really that great. It definitely doesn't compare to the stuff that we have now. And we didn't have as many options as we have now, but it was still pretty awesome for the time. And we didn't think anything of it. We thought it was fantastic. It's just the way things were. But what that convenience and those extra layers of detail have brought in is a subscription-based model. And it kind of all started with that. Because if you think about the other stuff that we subscribed to back then, it was, Blockbuster movie rentals, and that was an option. We had a choice. You either chose to rent the movie or you chose not to. And then we also had utilities and power and phone and all that stuff that we kind of have now. We had, rent, and we had a mortgage if you bought a house. So these are all things that have been kind of true throughout most of modern history. We had to pay on certain things in a subscription-based way. If you want electric, you have to pay on it. If you want water, if you want sewage, if you want all the utilities and all these things, if you want a roof over your head, you have to pay on it. Generally monthly. There were very few cases where you could get away from that, and that is especially true now. But what has happened as we've progressed with this is it's becoming very, very difficult to get away from these subscription-based models, to get away from the memberships and the constant payments that we have every single month. Because everything in our modern world is moving in that direction. You think about cell phones now. It's actually kind of hard to live your life without a cell phone. If you think about the way we pay for stuff, you can tap to pay with your phone now. A lot of the bills that we pay now have to be done online. It's kind of a hassle to bust out a laptop or get on a PC every single time you want to do that kind of stuff. You don't have the entertainment and the information and all this stuff at your fingertips like you would unless you're holding a phone. And this is still a choice. It's a choice that we all are making, to have these phones and to pay these monthly subscriptions. But like I mentioned, it is becoming more difficult to get away from that. And it's not just the phone. If you think about the phone, you're paying for the phone most likely itself. You're paying for the actual device, but then you're also paying for the service for the phone. You're paying for various apps. And in some cases, those apps have pay aspects inside the app. So it goes multiple layers deep. It's almost like Inception, the movie Inception, if you've ever watched it, where they go into the dream world and they end up dreaming like layers and layers deep. That's basically what we're dealing with. We're going layers and layers deep in a subscription-based model. And the more layers that you go, the more you're paying. That's more money you're forking out, and it's not just a single payment. It's a perpetual payment that you can never escape from. So now essentially you're paying for features and you're paying more for comfort, because all these things, they are kind of comfort. And they are features to our lives. They are not essential, that's for sure. They're trying to make them essential, and that's one big reason this is happening, which we're going to get into. But as of right now, they're not essential. They're just features. They're highlights. They're aspects of our modern world. So now we are paying monthly for everything from entertainment, music, video, healthcare, insurance, you name it. Gym memberships, to buy food. In a lot of cases, we're paying for subscription-based purchases. In other words, we go on Amazon, and instead of just going on there every month or whenever we need something and ordering it, we sign up for the subscription model, and that stuff gets sent to us automatically. We don't have to do anything. And again, this all ties back to convenience. This is how we have essentially terraformed our lives. These are the things that we have adopted, and it is in large part the reason why it is moving in this direction. It's because where we are spending our money, it's how we're spending our time. The things that we're doing and the things that we're using are dictating this market, and it's causing this to happen. So everything from communities, courses, websites, shopping, orders, deliveries, all these things are moving to a subscription-based model. All these things tie back to convenience. And one of the big things that is happening as of 2025, which a lot of you probably are aware of, is that a lot of cars, a lot of vehicles now are moving to a subscription-based model, which is kind of absurd because a lot of cars these days are very expensive. As a matter of fact, I would say pretty much any new car now is very expensive. If you get into like a mid-level, mid-size sedan, you're looking at like $40,000 to $50,000. For a truck or an SUV, it goes up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And back in the day, that was a Lamborghini. That was a supercar. But now an SUV is going to cost you 90 to 100 grand. And the problem with this is that they have all these gadgets now, all these features inside the vehicle, and you get all that stuff when you buy it, but within a few months those things start to run out, and you have to pay to continue to have heated seats. You have to pay for your remote start to work. You have to pay for your heated steering wheel, and you have to pay to unlock certain horsepower on your car. They're creating a perpetual cycle of you never actually owning that car. You might own the shell, but you don't own all the features that you paid $100,000 for. And that is such an absurd idea. And the fact that people are still buying these cars and participating in this is mind-blowing to me. I have a family member that works for a very large dealership, and I was in their office just the other day, and we were looking at these vehicles, and there was a brand new Tahoe sitting there, $98,000, fully loaded, that had all of these comforts I'm talking about, and within a couple months they run out, and it's $100 a month to keep those things turned on. How can you buy a vehicle and then have to continue to pay on it, even after it's paid off, just to make sure all of the features that you bought, and most likely that you bought the vehicle for because it had all those features, you have to pay to keep those on? This is what we're left with. This is where we're headed. And it's not just vehicles, it's everything in life. If you think about owning a home, if you think about having a roof over your head, it's all moving to a subscription-based model. We have all these large corporations and all these investment firms that are gobbling up houses. They're buying them. They're fixing the market by reselling them to themselves, to their shell companies and all this. So it jacks the price up. That jacks the taxes up. It jacks the insurance up. These are subscriptions. Taxes and insurance, they're subscriptions. You have to pay on these things every single month if you own In some cases, even if you rent. And when the market is fixed and everything is inflated, you're paying higher prices for these subscription payments. And in large part, when these companies and these investment firms buy these homes, they're not selling them. They're renting them out and they're leasing them. Subscription-based model. That's exactly where the housing market's headed. And even if you own your home, and I'm talking own it outright, as in it's paid for, you still are essentially renting that home. You're subscribing to that home because you always have to pay property taxes. Unless there's some sort of reform that's done in certain states where they do away with that, you never actually own that home. It's still a subscription-based model. And the fact that everything is moving in that direction is a really bad thing, especially when you consider that because the housing market is so expensive and nobody can afford to buy houses these days, they're talking about offering a 50-year mortgage. And that is also moving us more towards a subscription-based model, because when you're paying on a home for 50 years, you're never going to own that home. Unless you pay it off early, you will never own it, because 50 years, if you buy the home at 30, you're 80 years old. How many people live to be that old? You end up paying on that home your entire life. This is the direction we're headed. And it doesn't even stop there, because even the way that we pay for things is headed in that direction. If you think about all the payment options we have now, you know, back in the day it was layaway. That was the big thing. You go to Walmart, you go to Kmart, you put stuff on layaway. They hold the product, you never actually own it. They hold the product and you pay on it little by little until it's paid off, and then you pick the product up. The way it is now, you can buy anything you want. You can get a loan, you can get buy now, pay later. There are so many options for owning pretty much anything. And the interest rate for some of these things, just like the vehicles I was talking about before, when I was in there looking at these vehicles, they were talking about they were selling these vehicles with interest rates of 25%. That is higher than my credit card. I have a credit card that I use for petty purchases that I pay off every single month. And if I didn't pay that off, the interest would be like 21.5%. These vehicles that they're selling with all these features that get turned off, have interest rates now up to 25%, and I think in some cases even beyond that. And you think about the amount of interest that you're paying on that. If you're paying on a 50-year mortgage, the amount of interest that you pay on a home, if it's like a $450,000 home, is over $1 million just in interest. So think about that. That is exactly where we're headed. And the problem with us heading in that direction means that we're shelling out a lot of money, because when you subscribe to these buy now, pay later services and you partake in all this stuff where the interest rate's super high and you're constantly paying on stuff, you'll end up paying more on the interest than you will the principal. And in many cases, depending on how long you pay on this stuff, you're actually going to pay more on the interest than you would for the actual product. And in many cases, you could have bought the actual product several times over before it's paid off, because you're paying so much in interest. Currently, we are looking at the tokenization and the monetization of everything in our lives. And I'm not even talking about technology. I'm not talking about conveniences. I'm talking about the natural world. All right. And this is where it gets really crazy, because there are people, I'm not going to name names, but I will put some links in the description and the pinned comment below. There are people now talking about, just like I said, tokenizing and monetizing our natural world, water, resources, trees, land, the natural world around us, stuff that I'm sitting in right now. People want to monetize that. They don't want you to have access to anything without paying a subscription to access it. That is how these people get rich. That is how they stay rich, because ever since they realized that they could create memberships and subscription-based models around pretty much everything in our lives, and that there were certain things that they could do to kind of force us into these positions, that is what they've decided to do. Everything is moving towards retention instead of acquisition. It is moving to access instead of ownership. We're paying for access to everything in our lives, including now, or soon to be, our natural world. The world that we all exist in and that we were born into, that we should have the right to access just by simply being born. But there are people now that are looking to take that away from us, and they're looking to put a price tag on it. And they're looking to restrict your access unless you pay to play. That is the way of the future world. But what is this costing us? Us little guys here at the bottom that are stuck dealing with all this stuff. I would say it's costing us a lot. Not only is it costing us our access to what should be our God-given rights to certain things, it's costing us our money, because the more that we subscribe, the more that we pay to play, the more that we buy into this, that is more money that we're spending. Just like I talked about before, when you're doing the buy now, pay later, when you're constantly paying on things, there's a pretty good chance that you're paying interest. You're going to be paying more than the thing is worth. And when you move to a subscription-based model and everything is controlled by corporations and private investment firms, everything's inflated because everything is basically fixed because they control the market and they can fix it and set the prices to whatever they want. So chances are it's going to be just like what we're seeing now with housing and vehicles, where the price just keeps going up and we're stuck paying it. So that almost by definition means that we're also in more debt. That is costing us more money and more debt. And when you're in more debt, that is also a perpetual payment, because you'll never get out of debt unless you pay it off. And to pay it off, you have to pay every single month. If you don't, bad things happen. This is another major way they keep us trapped, and it's all part of this subscription-based model. And above all else, that is the ultimate goal. It is to keep us trapped. It is to keep us indebted to the system our entire lives without the opportunity or the chance to ever escape. And when you think about it in those terms, you really start to see how much it's actually costing us. Because when you don't own anything, there's no long-term value for anything. You can't turn around and sell assets that you own because you don't own anything. If you've been renting your entire life or you've never paid your house off, you can't turn around and sell it for a profit because all the money that you put into it, you basically thrown away. The same is true for a car or a vehicle. What's the resale value on a car that you have to pay $100 up to $1,000 a month to keep the features turned on? It's probably not going to be very high. And cars already are one of the most quickly depreciating assets. So when you factor these things in, it's probably going to be even more profound. And I think we're seeing that with cars like Tesla and a lot of these electric vehicles that aren't worth anything. These cars have some of the lowest resale value of any other car on the market because it costs so much to maintain. It costs so much to keep the thing running, to keep all the features going. When you're paying for a subscription or a membership or you're renting, the moment you drop that thing is an automatic loss. All the money that you've put into it, even if you've been putting money into it your entire life, you've just thrown all that away the moment that you get rid of that thing. And if you really think about this on the deepest level, on what this is costing us, I would say it's costing us our lives. Not in a literal sense, but being able to live our lives. Because the more that you're indebted to the system, the more that you're paying, that is more of your time that you're giving up. Because you have to work to get that money. And when you work, most of work revolves around giving up your time. And that is the system that has been created. That is how they keep us trapped. And when you're trapped in that system, you can't go after anything else in life that you want to pursue. Especially if you're drowning in this subscription-based, renters-based society. It creates a vicious cycle and a perpetual loop of never being able to get ahead and always having debt and payments held over your head. And that is a lot of stress. That's a lot of anxiety. That is probably a big reason why people are feeling kind of defeated and exhausted, because in a lot of cases, these things pile up so high that it can feel like there's no way out. In a very real way, it can feel like you're renting your life. And if you really think about it, you kind of are. Because if most of the aspects of your life revolve around this kind of model, you don't own it. The system owns it, because the system owns the model. Therefore, it owns you. So with all that said, how do we break free from this? Or how do we avoid it altogether? Is there even a way to do that? I would say yes. I would say yes, there is. And it's probably very important that we do that now and we get ahead of this before it continues, because it's only going to get much harder to escape from. It's only going to get much harder to avoid. But to avoid it and to escape from it, I think it's really just a matter of getting back to the basics. If you think about your life, or think about life back before we had this type of subscription-based model, before we were reliant on all these conveniences, those are the things we should probably focus on. And in a lot of cases, it's going to be very hard to get rid of all subscriptions. It's going to be very hard to get rid of all memberships. And it's going to be very hard to not pay to play, but I think there are a lot of things we can trim out. Because like I mentioned before, these subscriptions add up pretty quickly. And a lot of people can forget they even have them. So I think it's important to just do an audit on yourself, do an audit on what you're paying on, and see if there are things that you can stop paying on. Apps, subscriptions, memberships, buy now, pay later, all the stuff that maybe you're indebted to. See if there are things that you can trim out. See if you can pay down your debt. That's another big thing, because the less debt that you have, the more free you're going to be. And a lot of this really does come down to just reducing your expenses. The less money that you owe, the less payments that you have, the less that you're partaking in this system that is seeking to trap us. And you also have to remember that the less that you pay, the less that you buy, and the less that you subscribe, that's also less taxes that you're paying. Because again, taxes are essentially a subscription-based model. They are very reliant on us paying every single month or every single year or every time we buy something or every time we sell something. It is reoccurring revenue, and it empowers this entire system, this large cabal that we're talking about. So the less that you spend overall, the less that you participate in this system as a whole, the less you're going to be feeding it. Because as of right now, we are essentially feeding our existence. We are breeding it into life. We are allowing it to proliferate. And I would say we are actually giving it the clout so that it can proliferate. The reason things are moving in this direction is because of where we spend our time, where we spend our attention, and where we spend our money. So if we can reverse that, if we can do the opposite of what we're doing now, that's probably going to weaken the system. And that is definitely going to free you, because that is less financial burden, and that is less that you're participating in all this. So if you really think about it, we are fueling our own demise. We are actually breeding our future into existence. And this is something I've learned in terms of not just this, but many things in life, is that if you want to get ahead and you want to better yourself, you want to improve your health, or you want to just improve overall and optimize your life, all you really have to do is do the opposite of what we're told. Because what we're told right now is that we should be subscribing to all these things. We should be buying all this new stuff. Society tells us so. Society tells us to keep up with the Joneses. It tells us to buy the next newest thing. It tells us to take part in consumerism and buy all this materialistic stuff. It tells us to be in debt. It tells us to go after all these things that are allowing this system to proliferate. So it makes sense that if we want to get away from that, all we have to do is do the opposite. Stop participating in modern society. Stop buying into all this stuff that we're told and believing that all these things are going to make us happy, because I can tell you from experience that the more materialistic stuff you have, the more debt that you have hanging over your head, the more unhappy you're going to be. None of these things are going to make you happy. The things in life that are going to make you happy are not the things that we're told. It is actually quite the opposite. That is what I found to be true for myself. Maybe that's not true for everybody, but I think that if more people can get back to the basics and be present and enjoy the present moment and be grateful in life for what they have and even the things that they don't have, you're going to be happier. You're going to be more fulfilled, because you're going to be living a life that is more natural, the way that we have lived probably throughout most of history, all up until the last couple hundred years, and specifically the last 40 to 50 years, because things are progressing and changing at an unprecedented rate, and our mind has not adjusted to this new world that we're now trapped in. So the faster that we can escape from this, and the less burden that we can place on ourselves, the more fulfilled, the more happy we're going to be, and that's going to give us the freedom to actually go after the things in life that we want. And if we don't know what those things are, it's going to give us the time to be able to focus on figuring out what those things are. And that in turn will allow us to begin to live an intentional and purposeful life that is true to us. And always remember that the idea that we need all these creature comforts and we need to subscribe to all this stuff, it's just an illusion. It is an illusion to keep us trapped. The truth of the matter is that we're not relying on it. That system and this entire scenario is reliant on us. Without us, none of it exists. Like I mentioned before, we're breeding this into existence, but if we weren't, we wouldn't be headed in this direction. And it is very important to remember that, because that empowers you. That allows you to realize that our future is in our hands. Everything is in our control. The only thing we have to do to change our outcome is to just change our habits, change our behaviors. These things are nothing without us. This entire system, everything that we're talking about here, hinges on the backs of the hardworking men and women of this country and around the globe. So please, if you take one thing away from this video, let it be that, and never forget it.